see those things start to go away. You know that you're going to lose revenue. You know that we were losing jobs. Why is it now all of a sudden that you're coming up with this plan, hadn't implemented this 5 years ago before we got into this situation?
If you read my plan, you will see that a good section of this plan talks about implementation of the law that we just passed at the end of the last legislative session, specifically ensuring the legislative intent in the implementation of the small business cost containment initiatives relative to small group health insurance, implementation of the Gateway City initiatives that we passed, and implementation of the small business regulatory impact statements. And what I mean by ensuring implementation, because too often bureaucrats interpret legislative intent much different than what the legislators that wrote the bill intended to do. And specifically what this bill would do, some of the specifics, it would move the workforce training fund from an appropriation line item to a trust fund. It would create a $2,500 refundable tax credit for each Massachusetts new hire. It would fix the independent contract law, something that we've been trying to fix now throughout this last legislative session. It's a 30-page, 42-section bill.
Mr. Lawless, a follow-up question to Mr. Roderick.
Well, my question was, why now and not 5 years ago, when we could see that we were going in a downturn? That was my question.
This is a continuation of programs that we started 5 years ago. Many of these components have been filed by me over the course of the last few legislative sessions, and they haven't been successful in passing. And it's a continuation. And I understand that whenever you put a plan out there in writing in specific, it's going to be criticized. Maybe that's what's preventing the rest of my opponents from filing a plan. They're a fear of being criticized. But I think it's important that we talk in specifics.
Mr. Roderick, it's your turn to ask a question of one of your colleagues, and to whom might you be directing that question, sir?
I'll start with Mr. Lawless.
Okay.
We'll stay along the same theme, Lon. If you have problems with my plan, what specifically are your plans to deal with the #1 issue facing the South Coast now? That's the economy and job creation. And what specifically would you propose in legislation?
Well, first of all, in legislation, what we have to go with the green jobs. I think any state funding that's put into construction, there should be legislation that when that money goes in, there has to be green technology going into any construction. I mean, in Iraq, they put up, street lights that were solar. I mean, we can do the same thing here. So any state funding, there should be legislation mandating that a certain percentage should be used in green technology when funds are used from the state.
Follow-up question, sir?
Well, we do that already. We not only do we mandate it, we also provide incentive tax credits for companies, because there's two ways, and that's what companies like. They don't like the stick by mandates. They want incentives to be helped by doing green jobs or any other sort of proposal. Anything else that you would propose? Just green jobs, mandating it?
Well, it's not just green jobs, Mike. We got to get manufacturing that's going to be conducive to the Fall River area, and taking some people and putting them in. I used to train people. I know you can take somebody and put them on the line. The next wave, and I've been talking about it all along, is energy. The next wave is green technology. That's what we have to hit, because, I won't be on this earth, neither will you, maybe, Mike, in 40, 50 years from now. You might be, I don't know. But let me tell you, if we don't do something now, we will not have the oil reserves to feed the rest of the world with our energy.
Thank you very much. Mr. Coogan, the question comes back to you now, and you may ask a question of one of your colleagues. To whom might you be directing your question, sir?
I'll ask a question to John. John, I know that the casino issue came up when you were the mayor of Fall River. Can you tell me? I think we talked about this the last debate. I know you said you had discussions with Circus Circus. Did you do anything other than have discussions with Circus Circus to help casino gaming get off the ground here in Massachusetts, and specifically Fall River?
Sure, and you seem pretty fixated on what happened 20 years ago, and I've pointed out before there was no gambling bill at the time. There may have been one proposed in the legislature, but it certainly wasn't active. It wasn't being debated, and there was a clear sense that gaming was not going to be allowed in Massachusetts. Circus came in largely because of a local vote that they thought would give them a toehold. But yeah, apart from Circus, and when I say we met with them, I mean we met with them multiple times, many occasions. I went out and learned an awful lot about gambling, read studies, read reports, hired UMass Dartmouth, their Center for Policy Analysis, which I'm proud to say was just forming at the time I was mayor, and that we used extensively, including on the gambling issue, and worked with them and learned the pluses and minuses of gambling, particularly at that distant time and given the vacuum of any gambling legislation.
Mr. Coogan, a follow-up question.
Well, I mean, I would argue that it's not a law now, but this administration, the planning administration, has taken a very proactive approach in trying to get this off the ground, whether it's petitioning state legislation or federal legislation. And, you know, if this had happened 20 years ago, I think that revenue would have done a lot to help the city in the last 20 years.
Well, that's a great compliment to me, but 20 years ago I was only mayor. I wasn't also governor and Speaker of the House and President of the Senate. So, and I think, you know, in fairness, let's point that out, that the Speaker had a bill, the Senate President has a bill, and the Governor has a bill, and they're in the positions of authority to create the legislation. I was a mayor of a city. There was no such legislation. It wasn't along the way it is. And I think 20 years ago we handled it the appropriate way.
Mr. Mitchell.